Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. As always, we take your sources and really dig into them. And today, we're diving into a story you probably think you know, Anne Frank. But this time we're going beyond the secret annex. Before the diary, to uncover her father Otto's desperate attempts to escape the Nazis, our main source for this deep dive is the audio documentary. It's called No Asylum, the Untold Chapter of Anne Frank's Story.
Yeah, it's an incredible documentary. It features all of these recently released letters from Otto, and it really adds a new dimension to this historical narrative.
I mean, you think you know this story,
Yeah.
and then you hear this, and you realize there was this whole other struggle that we never really knew about.
Right. I mean, we often kind of jump right into Anne's diary and her experience in hiding, but her family's story started much earlier, in the 1930s, amidst the rise of Nazi persecution in Germany.
It's just chilling to think about that time. The stormtroopers, the hateful rhetoric, that growing sense of dread for Jewish families. Like the Franks.
Absolutely. And the Franks weren't naive. They saw what was happening. And in 1933, the same year that Hitler became chancellor, they made the difficult decision to leave everything behind. And they went to Amsterdam.
Makes you wonder. I mean, a lot of people probably thought the Nazi regime would be short-lived.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had that hope. But Otto, he seemed to really grasp the urgency of the situation. Maybe more so than others.
I mean, he was definitely a man of action.
Yeah.
But even the most determined efforts, sometimes they can be thwarted by forces beyond our control.
Right, and that's where this documentary is so powerful, because it really details Otto's attempts to get visas for his family. And we're not just talking about a general sense of difficulty, we're talking specific countries, bureaucratic roadblocks, dashed hopes, and just this growing sense of desperation.
Yeah, and there's this correspondence with Nathan Strauss Jr., whose family owned Macy's. And Otto writes to him, "It is for the sake of the children mainly. Our own fate is of less importance."
Wow. I mean, just think about that.
Heartbreak.
A father willing to do anything to protect his children in the face of this hateful ideology that was consuming Europe.
It's just incredible how these letters bring history to life. We're not just reading about events, we're experiencing Otto's struggle.
Exactly. And he contacted countless officials, filed so many applications, it's almost hard to even imagine navigating that system.
I mean, that's a story that resonates even today.
Yeah.
With so many refugees around the world facing these same barriers.
Sadly, it does. It's like we're seeing history repeat itself.
In a way, it is.
Yeah. And we see this with Otto, with his attempts to get visas for the U.S., Cuba, Honduras, Argentina, all denied.
Each one must have been just a crushing blow. I mean, you can almost feel the weight of each closed door.
Absolutely. The dwindling options. And the situation in Europe is deteriorating rapidly.
Right.
And his letters from this time, you can just feel this sense of urgency. I mean, imagine getting a postcard from the Frank family, dated July 5th, 1942, with a line about not being able to correspond anymore.
Chilling. Knowing what comes next. It's really chilling. And this is all before Anne even starts writing her diary.
That's what's so important about this documentary. It's like a prequel to the story we all think we know. It's revealing the harrowing circumstances that led the Franks to the secret annex.
Right, and it really makes you think about how their story could have been so different.
It makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? What if just one of those visa applications had gone through?
It's a question that stays with you throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the power of these bureaucratic systems, how individual lives can get lost.
It's just caught up in the machinery of it all.
Exactly.
And the documentary really doesn't shy away from that.
No.
It forces you to confront those consequences.
It does.
The closed doors that led them to a fate they were desperately trying to escape.
Right.
So this brings us to July 1942, pivotal moment for the Frank family.
Yeah, Margot Ann's older sister, she gets a call-up notice for deportation.
I mean, this wasn't just a letter. This was a death sentence. And it was this moment that forced their decision to go into hiding.
To disappear into the secret annex.
Behind Otto's business.
Yeah.
And can you imagine the terror they must have felt, knowing time was running out? That being discovered meant certain capture.
It had to be terrifying.
So this is how we get to the chapter we're most familiar with, the one from Anne's diary.
Yeah.
The cramped quarters, the constant fear, the small joys and frustrations of daily life. But even as we revisit Anne's world, I think that knowledge of Otto's struggle really lingers.
It does. It adds this whole other layer of complexity to her story.
Yeah.
Gives us a deeper understanding of the forces that shape their lives.
It really does. And it's amazing how Anne's diary, written in such extraordinary circumstances, still resonates so much with people today.
Absolutely. I mean, her hopes, her fears, her dreams, they feel so universal, so timeless.
They do.
And her diary, it humanizes the victims of the Holocaust. It reminds us that behind the statistics were real people with stories to tell. She writes about her crushes, her arguments with her mother, her longing for freedom. These are experiences that transcend time and place.
They do. We can't forget the shadow that hangs over every entry. These seemingly ordinary teenage experiences taking place against a backdrop of unimaginable terror.
Absolutely. And that's where the documentary does such a great job of weaving together these two narratives. Otto's external fight for survival and Anne's internal world as she navigates being a teenager in hiding.
The striking contrast. Otto's letter is so urgent, pleading, and that Anne's diary is so introspective, reflective.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit finds ways to cope, to hope, to dream.
It does. And that brings us to August 4th, 1944.
Oh, yeah.
The day that shatters the peace of the secret annex.
The documentary really recreates the scene so well. The sudden arrival of the Nazi officers, the fear that grips everyone, the realization that their safe haven has been compromised.
It's such a stark reminder that even the most meticulous plans, the most carefully guarded secrets, can be shattered.
In an instant.
And from here, the story takes a really horrifying turn.
It does.
The Franks, along with the 4 others hiding with them,
Yeah.
they're arrested.
Yeah.
And they're transported to Westerbork, a transit camp in the Netherlands.
And for those who don't know, a transit camp was basically a way station, a holding pen for Jews before being deported to the concentration camps.
Right.
Imagine the despair, the realization that everything Otto had fought for, all those years searching for a safe haven, had led to this.
That's hard to fathom.
And Westerbork was only the beginning.
Right.
The documentary goes on to trace their journey to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the most notorious of the Nazi death camps.
And the conditions on the train, crammed into those cattle cars,
Yeah.
deprived of food and water. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine.
It is.
And then upon arriving at Auschwitz, the true horror of the Nazi regime becomes undeniably clear.
Absolutely. Families are brutally separated, men from women, children from their parents. It was dehumanization, immediate and deliberate.
And the documentary includes these eyewitness accounts of mothers being torn from their children, the elderly and infirm, selected for immediate extermination.
It's just a stark reminder of the systematic nature of the Holocaust, this cold, calculated cruelty that defied any sense of humanity.
And this is where Otto and Anne are separated.
Just devastating for both of them.
And from this point forward, their paths diverge.
Otto selected for forced labor, which I think is really a testament to his physical strength and resilience.
Right.
And Anne and Margot, along with their mother Edith, they're sent to a different section of the camp for women.
It's important to remember that survival at Auschwitz often came down to luck,
Absolutely.
being deemed useful to the Nazi regime.
Right. And the documentary highlights this by contrasting the fate of those fit for work with those immediately sent to the gas chambers.
The randomness of it all is just terrifying. It strips away any sense of control, any illusion of justice.
It does. And yet there are these glimmers of humanity, stories of prisoners helping each other, sharing scraps of food, offering comfort.
It's hard to imagine that in those conditions.
But it just shows you, even in the most dehumanizing conditions, human kindness can still find a way to shine through.
Always.
But as the war progressed and the Soviet army was advancing towards Auschwitz, the Nazi regime became increasingly desperate, leading to a new chapter of horror.
The evacuation of prisoners to other camps.
Deeper within German territory.
These death marches.
Yeah.
Forced journeys on foot. Brutal winter conditions. Little food or clothing.
Yeah, the weak and the sick often didn't survive.
And Anne and Margot, weakened from their time in Auschwitz, were forced on one of these death marches to Bergen-Belsen.
Another concentration camp, known for its horrific conditions.
And it's important to define what a death march was. It wasn't a march in any traditional sense. It was a brutal, forced exodus.
Yeah, calculated act of cruelty.
Designed to eliminate prisoners.
And Bergen-Belsen was a nightmare. Overcrowding, disease, starvation, typhus was rampant, and the medical facilities were completely overwhelmed.
A place where death was the norm.
It's
hard to imagine what that must have been like for Anne and Margot. After already enduring so much,
It's unimaginable.
those final months for Anne and Margot must have been just horrific.
Yeah, the documentary really doesn't hold back in describing how bleak things were at Bergen-Belsen, a place where hope had pretty much vanished.
And yet in all that despair, there's this one moment that shows just how strong human connection can be.
Oh, yeah. Anne is reunited with a childhood friend, Hanley Goslar. She was imprisoned in a different part of the camp.
And Hanley, later on, she talked about seeing Anne through the barbed wire fence. She said she was emaciated, weak, but still clinging to life.
Powerful image. Just shows the strength of their bond.
I mean, in the darkest of places, there's still that human connection.
Exactly.
April 1945,
Liberate.
British troops liberate Bergen-Belsen.
Revealing the full horror of what had been happening.
These images,
Ugh.
piles of corpses, skeletal survivors.
Yeah, it's hard to even process.
But for Anne and Margot, liberation came too late.
They both died from typhus.
Just weeks before the camp was liberated.
So close.
It's just heartbreaking to think about.
It is.
The king so close to surviving, only to be robbed of their freedom in those final days.
It's tragedy.
While Anne and Margot perished in Bergen-Belsen. Otto miraculously survived the evacuation of Auschwitz. He was eventually liberated by Soviet forces.
He went back to Amsterdam, still hoping he might find his daughters.
Could you imagine that emotional roller coaster? The joy of his own survival, but the agony of not knowing what happened to his children.
I can't.
And then he gets the news. Their deaths.
Just
He
devastating.
loses his entire family.
I can't even imagine.
But amidst all that loss, Otto finds some solace in Anne's diary.
Oh, wow.
It had been saved by Miep Gies, one of the helpers who had sheltered the family in the secret annex.
That's amazing.
And in 1947, Otto fulfilled Anne's wish to become a writer by publishing her diary.
Incredible.
The impact was immediate
Yeah.
and profound.
Yeah, Anne's diary became an international bestseller, translated into so many languages.
And it gave a voice to the millions who had perished in the Holocaust.
It's it.
And it also showed the human cost of this unimaginable tragedy.
Absolutely.
But Anne's diary, it wasn't just about suffering. It was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
That's what's so powerful about
Hope and love, even in the darkest of times.
her. Words resonated with people all over the world, inspiring generations to confront prejudice.
And to fight for a more just and compassionate world.
That's Anne Frank's legacy.
A young girl who, through her words,
Yeah.
transcended the horrors of her time to become a symbol of hope and humanity.
Powerful.
But the story doesn't end there. This documentary goes beyond the familiar narrative to explore the wider context of the Holocaust.
The failure of nations to act, the persistence of anti-Semitism, the importance of remembering.
Right.
And it connects Otto's struggle to save his family with what's happening today. Immigration, refugee resettlement, drawing those parallels between the closed doors of the 1930s and the challenges faced by displaced people even now.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we have to learn from the past.
We do.
How can we make sure that history doesn't repeat itself?
Yeah, it's the question.
How can we be more vigilant against injustice and intolerance?
We all have a role to play in that.
Stepping back from this deep dive, I'm struck by the power of storytelling. It can illuminate history, inspire empathy, and really challenge us to act.
It's a powerful tool.
We've gone from the desperate hope in Otto's letters to the intimate reflections in Anne's diary, and I think we've seen both the fragility and the resilience
Yeah,
of the human spirit.
I agree.
Maybe in their story, we can find some hope.
I think so.
A reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the human capacity for love, compassion, and courage can endure.
That's a beautiful thought.
So let's carry their legacy forward, not just by remembering the past, but by actively working towards a future where everyone is granted dignity and the freedom to live without fear.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.